Late in the book, The Brothers Karamazov, Ivan Karamazov is sick. He's got a fever. His father was recently murdered. His older brother, Dmitri, stands accused for the murder and will likely be convicted. And Ivan is struggling because he feels guilty. He feels racked by guilt. He doesn't think that Dmitri is the murderer. And he feels that maybe he precipitated the events. He set the events in motion that led to the murder of his father. And he's struggling with that guilt, and he's trying to figure out how he can rectify the situation. And in this totally compromised, vulnerable state, racked by his anxiety, racked by his fever and his illness, he gets a visitor. He's visited. And the visitor is the devil. This chapter in The Brothers Karamazov, called Ivan's Nightmare, is one of the most stunningly beautiful and complex and gripping chapters in The Brothers Karamazov, in my opinion. The form that the devil takes is described as follows. Quote, "In brief, there was every appearance of gentility on straitened means. It looked as though the gentleman belonged to that class of idle landowners who used to flourish in the times of serfdom. He had unmistakably been at some time in good fashionable society, had once had good connections, but after a gay youth becoming gradually impoverished on the abolition of serfdom, he had sunk into the position of a poor relative, wandering from one good old friend to another." End quote. This is not the first time Ivan has seen this visitor, this devil. He's familiar with this hallucination, and he starts off by, ignoring this hallucination. The hallucination says, "Hello, Ivan, I'm here. Why aren't you acknowledging me?" And Ivan says, "You're a hallucination. I don't want to talk to you. I want nothing to do with you. You just frustrate me." The devil continues to annoy Ivan, and Ivan says, "Don't make me kick you." And the devil says, "Ha, if you're going to kick me, that would be proof that you think I exist." Ivan says, quote, "Never for 1 minute have I taken you for reality," Ivan cried with a sort of fury. "You are a lie. You are my illness. You are a phantom. It's only that I don't know how to destroy you, and I see I must suffer for a time. You are an hallucination. You are the incarnation of myself, but only of one side of me, of my thoughts and feelings, but only the worst and most stupid of them." End quote. And what emerges from their discussion is that the devil has come to talk to Ivan about his decision to sacrifice himself to save his brother Dmitri. Ivan intends to bring evidence before the court that will implicate himself in the events that precipitated the murder of his father and exonerate his older brother Dmitri. And what the devil wants to do is the devil wants to parrot back some of Ivan's philosophy. Throughout the book, we get a sense that Ivan is really a philosophically minded person. He writes these articles, he writes these epic poems about religion, about utopian societies, about a future of science and a future of atheism, socialism. And he's a very polarizing kind of figure in what he writes. Some people are very scandalized by the kind of ideas he's presenting. And the devil wants to bring these ideas, many of these ideas, to Ivan and say, "Look at these great ideas of yours. These are such wonderful ideas." But in this moment of torment, in this moment of crisis in Ivan's life, he can't bear to hear these ideas, because at this particular moment, at this crisis, Ivan feels that these are the ideas that led ultimately to his own bad decisions and to the death of his father. There's some incredibly comedic moments in this chapter. At one point, the devil is talking about how he dreams of being incarnated as sort of an overweight woman who would just have very simple faith and light some candles in a shrine. And Ivan says, "Fool," to the devil. And the devil responds, quote, "You keep saying the same thing, but I had such an attack of rheumatism last year that I remember it to this day." Ivan: "The devil has rheumatism?" The devil: "Why not? If I sometimes put on fleshly form, I put on fleshly form and I take the consequences." Skipping a bit, the devil says, "You are angry with me for being able to catch a cold, though it happened in a most natural way. I was hurrying to a diplomatic party at the house of a lady of high rank in Petersburg, who was aiming at influence in the ministry. Well, an evening suit, white tie, gloves, though I was God knows where and had to fly through space to reach your Earth. Of course, it only took an instant, you know. A ray of light from the sun takes 8 minutes. And just imagine, in an evening suit and open waistcoat, spirits don't freeze, but when one's in fleshly form, well, in brief, I didn't think and set off. And you know, in those ethereal spaces, in the water that is above the firmament, there's such a frost. At least, one can't call it frost. You can imagine 150 degrees below zero. You know the game the village girls play? They invite the unwary to lick an axe in zero weather. The tongue instantly freezes to it, and the fool tears the skin off, so it bleeds. But that's only at zero. At 150 degrees below, I imagine it would be enough to put your finger on an axe, and it would be the end of it. If only there could be an axe there." And then Ivan steps in. "And can there be an axe there?" Ivan interrupted carelessly. He was exerting himself to the utmost not to believe in the delusion and not to sink into complete insanity. "An axe?" the guest interrupted in surprise. "Yes, what would become of an axe there?" Ivan cried suddenly with a sort of savage and insistent obstinacy. What would become of an axe in space? What an idea! If it were to fall any distance, it would begin, I think, flying around the Earth without knowing why, like a satellite. The astronomers would calculate the rising and the setting of the axe. Getzuk would put it in his calendar. That's all." End quote. In this chapter, the devil echoes back a lot of Ivan's philosophical ideas. But towards the end of this chapter, after a lot of heated dialogue, we finally get to the climax, the most painful and crucial thing that the devil has come to sort of echo back to Ivan in his moment of suffering. The devil says, quote, "And the geological cataclysm, do you remember? That was a poem." So the devil is saying to Ivan, "I'm going to now talk to you about this great poem that you wrote that I love." And Ivan says, "Keep quiet or I'll kill you." And the point being that Ivan does not want to hear this poem right now. And we'll see why. What is in this poem that Ivan wrote that he now cannot bear to hear it? The devil: "You'll kill me? No, excuse me. I will speak. I came to treat myself to that pleasure. Oh, I love the dreams of my ardent young friends, quivering with eagerness for life. There are new men. You decided last spring when you were planning to come here. They propose to destroy everything and begin with cannibalism. Fools! They didn't ask my advice. I maintain that nothing need be destroyed and that we only need to destroy the idea of God in man. That's how we have to set to work. It's that we must begin with. O blind race of men who have no understanding. As soon as men have all denied God, and I believe that period, corresponding with geological periods, will come to pass, the old conception of the universe will fall of itself without cannibalism. And what's more, the old morality and everything will begin anew." End quote. What the devil is describing and what Ivan had written about is this idea that we can create a new world. We can create a utopia. And we don't need to create a utopia by destroying everything. We can create a utopia by abandoning the idea of God, starting from atheism, starting from humanism, from existentialism. We continue, quote, "Men will unite to take from life all it can give, but only for joy and happiness in the present world." Ivan is articulating the utopian atheistic vision, the existentialist notion of human independence, human freedom from religion. Man will be lifted up with a spirit of divine titanic pride, and the man God will appear. This is Dostoevsky writing tens of years before Nietzsche, and he's talking about the death of God. He's talking about the man God, which of course evokes Nietzsche's Superman, this idea of the redemption that comes by transcending the notion of God and focusing on this life. He continues, "Extending his conquest of nature by his will and his science, man will feel such lofty joy from hour to hour that it will make up for all his old dreams of the joys of heaven. Everyone will know that he is mortal and will accept death proudly and serenely like a god. His pride will teach him that it's useless for him to grieve at life's being a moment, and he will love his brother without need of reward. Love will be sufficient only for a moment of life. But this very consciousness will intensify its fire, which now is dissipated in dreams of eternal love beyond the grave. And so on in the same style. Charming, the devil says to Ivan. We continue. Ivan sat with his eyes cast downward and his hands pressed to his ears. He began trembling all over. The voice continued. The question now is, my young thinker reflected, is it possible that such a period will ever come? If it does, everything is determined, and humanity is settled forever. But since, owing to man's stupidity, this cannot come about for at least 1,000 years, everyone who recognizes the truth now may legitimately order his life as he pleases, on the new principles. In that sense, all things are lawful for him. And if that isn't Nietzsche, what is? The idea of the Superman who has broken the chains of the slave morality, of Judeo-Christian morality, who's moved beyond deontology, who's not constrained by laws, religious precepts, who gets to think in utopian terms, who can think in utilitarian terms. He's free from these confines. He's the Superman. And that was the crux of Ivan's whole way of thinking. And now, in this state, it's a torment for Ivan to hear the devil echo these words to him. Eventually, the devil is going to criticize Ivan and say, it's a nice philosophy, but I'm not so sure about it. The devil says, quote, "That's all very charming, but if you want to swindle, why do you want a moral sanction for doing it? But that's our modern Russian all over. He can't bring himself to swindle without moral sanction. He is so in love with truth." And so he's really stabbing Ivan. He's saying, listen, if you don't want to follow the religious precepts, then do what you want. Why do you have to come up with a philosophy to justify it? The visitor talked, obviously carried away by his own eloquence, speaking louder and louder, and looking ironically at his host. But he did not succeed in finishing. Ivan suddenly snatched a glass from the table and threw it at him. Oh, how stupid of you, cried the gentleman, jumping up from the sofa and shaking off the drops of tea. I suspected you were only pretending to stop up your ears. A loud, persistent knocking was suddenly heard at the window. Ivan jumped up from his seat. Do you hear? You'd better open, cried the gentleman. It's your brother Alyosha, with the most interesting and surprising news. We'll stop there.